Bob Iger dropped a shocking revelation at the Moffat-Nathanson conference. He confessed that it would be impossible for Disney Plus to make a profit. Let's talk about that on That Park Place. Hello, I am Jonas J. Campbell, an investigative reporter for That Park Place, and here with me is avid television watcher, Mr. VashSky. Vash, are you caught up on American Idol yet?
I have not caught up on American Idol. I don't know who's the finalists or anything like that. But you know what? I have caught up on Shogun, and apparently that is part of the DTC strategy going forward for the Walt Disney Company.
Yeah. Apparently they're going to do a season 2, and they've gotten authorization from the author's estate to do that. So I don't think there was any more to cover, but they're going to go ahead and do a second season. Not saying it'll be good, not saying it'll be bad, but they're going to continue without the original author. But let's talk about what's going on with Bob Iger and his television strategy. The last time I checked, Bob Iger was in charge of the company when Disney Plus was laying out its capital expenditure. And in fact, he was only away from the company for a brief 11-month sabbatical hiatus, I believe was the word that he used. But in this conference that he was at, Bob Iger reflects on Disney's streaming launch. We invested too much. The studio boss talked about his turnaround strategy to boost audience engagement and manage traditional TV and digital assets seamlessly. This is by Eaton Blessing from The Hollywood Reporter. As we got into the streaming business in a very, very aggressive way, we tried to tell too many stories. Basically, we invested too much, way ahead of possible returns. It's what led to streaming ending up as a $4 billion loss. There's so much to unpack there. Vash, what do you see here that is, first of all, the blaring red light?
Well, the blaring red light is $4 billion. I don't quite think that it was just $4 billion. I think you're attempting to hide a lot and obfuscate a lot by that. But the very, very aggressive part, I would say, is actually probably correct. And invested too much in that. I would say so. This is what I was saying back at, I don't know, 2 years ago when it was like, wow, we're spending another $30 billion on content specifically for streaming. That's a little much, isn't it? Well, sure enough, it might have been, but it wasn't just limited to $4 billion, that's for sure.
Right. And if we just, the conservative figure here, if we just track operating loss for just assigned to Disney Plus, which Disney is not going to give those figures out anymore, it sounds like, unless the investors really hold their feet to the fire. They're now describing the entire streaming landscape at Disney as combined DTC. So they didn't say Disney Plus made $47 million in the last quarter. They said combined DTC, which includes Hulu, and of course includes, actually that figure might even not include ESPN Plus. So they're smashing them together. They're hiding Disney Plus behind Hulu, which is more profitable. Also, they're moving a lot of stuff off of their books onto other segments that are not combined to that figure so that they can get that up to 47 million. But if you just look at operating loss on Disney Plus over the last 4 years, I think that sums up to around $14 billion in losses. So maybe he's talking about $4 billion in a single quarter on a bad year. Maybe he's talking about, I don't know where that $4 billion come from, but that's to the point where I wonder if he was trying to pull a fast one on somebody so that they would say, oh, well, he's only lost $4 billion. That's how much you buy. That's how much you buy a Marvel for. That's how much you buy a Star Wars for. Lucasfilm, but they really haven't done anything with it other than Star Wars. Not to mention Willow, which was thrown away, and of course Indiana Jones, which cost them many, many hundreds of millions of dollars. Vash,
right?
There are other things that went into calculating how much they've just spent on streaming here. What are some other large expenditures that were related specifically to streaming, at least according to Bob Iger?
Well, I mean, you had the acquisition of BAMTech in order to create the streaming platform in which Disney Plus, its backbone is essentially. You have those two tranches of $30 billion each in 2021 and 2022 in order to create content for the platform, and then obviously they wanted a big library in which to have content for this, and that came in the. With the Fox acquisition for $70 billion, a lot of that, by the way, there were headlines and there were interviews given at the time. A lot of that was because of their content library for their streaming strategy specifically. Again, I mean, that's only a couple. I'm sure there's more that I haven't necessarily thought of, but this is why we question this $4 billion figure. Now, if you want to talk about like operating loss over an extended period of time, I think they had peak losses of $1.8 billion when Chapek was removed. Now, maybe you're talking about that, but it's a lot more than four.
Right, as if Bob Chapek couldn't have fixed the same things about Disney Plus, which they were headed that direction anyways. They already had the put call arrangement that Bob Iger had put into place in order to purchase the rest of Hulu from NBC Universal, owned by Comcast. Nelson Peltz was so helpful to point out that 66% of Fox, when Bob Iger bought it for streaming, 66% of it was actually linear assets. So that represents of that 70 billion, that's about 46 billion of that is just linear assets. So if linear was going away, then that represents a massive exposure for the company to be buying something that is going to be quote unquote going away. So at minimum, that's $23.8 billion that was spent specifically on the streaming side. More than that, if you follow Bob Iger's own figures there. It sounds like the purchase of the last shares of Hulu from Comcast, Bob Iger wanted to say it was going to be $8.61 billion, when in actuality, that's probably going to be closer to 13 billion or 15 billion when it's all said and done, because Comcast values, and by the way, they've now had to go and trigger that worst case scenario where the two investment firms that were hired to value Hulu, they didn't agree with each other, and they weren't within the range that they would just they would average the two. They have to add in a third investment bank to value it now. So we don't know how much Hulu is going to cost, but it sounds like it's more than Bob Iger was originally stating. All of that $4 billion loss, we focused on that here for the first part of the video, but I want to get back to the headline for me. Basically, we invested too much way ahead of possible returns. This right here is complete financial malfeasance to me.
Yes.
Why wasn't anyone considering how much they would actually make on Disney Plus when they keep greenlighting these $250 million shows, otherwise known as $250 million a season, for things like The Mandalorian or Ahsoka or Andor, or movies that went directly to Disney Plus? I wonder, did they actually think that they could outspend Netflix and people would magically appear for all of this?
They really did think that. I think they thought, okay, let's get like the prime franchises that everybody wants, because that's kind of how Bob Iger thinks right there. And then we could spend gobs of money on those in an arms race, and we'll be in. Maybe we can't match the amount of capital being spent by Netflix, but our IP will set us apart. This is why the Disney Plus branding is so crucial, I think, to the strategy for Bob Iger going forward when it comes to streaming. The previous strategy was, or the previous thinking, I should say, was, okay, not everybody's going to get every streaming service out there. There's going to be consolidation along the way, and we want to be one of the like main three that people have. And whatever we can spend to achieve that, we will. I think that's honestly how they felt and how they thought. And obviously that didn't work out. They lost the war. They lost the arms race. And so this is why you're seeing this backtrack here. And this is also why I think they're getting, into bed with like Warner Brothers, for example, for venue, because they don't want to have the same experience that they've had with general content, with sports content.
I think you're totally right there. And by the way, for those of you who think that Disney spent all of that money and then ended up as number two, no, that is definitely not the case. Let's see if we can find a figures from an excellent Twitter account called Mac @NowIt'sKnown. Whenever we have the opportunity, we like to point this out. These are the April 2024 numbers. Other streaming representing 5.8% there at the top. YouTube is 9.6% of all video streaming. Of course, this is discounting the fact that cable represents more than 50% at this point. If you go from YouTube down to Netflix, down to Prime Video, so that you have at least 3 streaming services that are ahead of Hulu and then Disney Plus. So Disney Plus is 5th place, and Tubi is just about beating them here with 1.7% of the market. And Tubi does not do content spend in the same way. Tubi is a free with ads streamer, and
Right.
and they're just about to beat Disney Plus. If Disney Plus did not have the amazing luck of having said yes to Bluey in 2019, 1/3 of all television streaming on Disney Plus would be completely wiped out. As we're looking at figures right now, and we'll talk about this on That Park Place at 10 p.m. Eastern time on Monday. If you look at Disney Plus, 1/3 of Disney Plus streaming right now appears to be those original programs. Another third is Bluey, and another third must be vault programming or movies that have just made their way to the streamer here. So
Right.
this is an incredible for the fact that they knew that they could not make money on that 1/3 of their streaming service, and the fact that Bluey is the only thing keeping them in the top half of this. They would be down below Peacock if it weren't for Bluey. I just don't see why Bob Iger is allowed to keep his job if he is the one that made these investments. He is the one that greenlit all of this. He's the one that went to the board and said, you know what, let me set all our executive compensation because this is not going to make money. He seemed to know this was not going to make money. So why did he do this? I do not know. Vash, do you have anything to comment here before we wrap this video up?
A couple of comments for sure. If Tubi overtakes Disney Plus, it'll be massive. That is for sure. And we talk about Bluey and we talk about this programming, this mostly I don't want to say child's programming, but kid-friendly programming that is hard to monetize because, well, if they're going into the advertising model, well, obviously that creates a problem when you're trying to advertise to kids who don't necessarily have any purchasing power. That's the issue there as well. And I think, Jonas, if we do the math, are we the Bluey of YouTube? I don't know. Maybe we might. Folks, we might. The gigawatts might have propelled us to the top.
Well, I do. Well, first of all, I'm never worried about whether this channel is the most watched channel or whether WDW Pro is the most watched channel. There's some people that matters, and that's fine. I like talking about the things I like talking about, and maybe we'll think about a title after we talk about the things we want to talk about. Maybe we'll think about titling it in the most inviting way possible. Maybe you could call that a clickbaity title, but we're going to talk about the things that we want to talk about. Because if I didn't want to talk about it, we wouldn't talk about it because I don't want to live my life that way. However, Disney is always chasing those headlines. They want to have the first XYZ character on a Marvel show that airs on Tuesdays in the month of June or whatever it is. By the way, hasn't escaped me that June is fast approaching, and they've got Pride spider robots they're going to be releasing at the parks. That's kind of a divergence here when we talk about it. Bob Iger is chasing headlines with massive amounts of money. They have the largest media company in the world, partially because they bought one of the second largest media companies in the world. And they are spending hundreds of billions of dollars to try to make Disney Plus happen. And it's not happening here. So they're gonna keep doing what they did do, which is take the name of Disney Plus, put it on top of Hulu, and hope that no one notices that they wasted hundreds of millions of dollars trying to make that thing work. But that being said, we want to throw this to our commenters. Are we being too harsh? Is there something that we're missing? Is there one of those multi-billion-dollar purchases that fell through the cracks, like perhaps that they lost $12 billion selling Star India? Let us know in the comment section down below. Oh, God, please, go ahead.
Tell us, commenters, is this the worst mistake that Disney's ever made in order to get into streaming and to invest this much money? I think that is an appropriate question.
You know, that's a really good question, and I can think of one thing in particular that might outrank it, but I'm going to see if our commenters come up with it. So with that being said, though, like this video if you like this video, and consider subscribing to That Park Place for all the news that should be fun.
Thanks for watching That Park Place News. For more information, consider checking out www.thatparkplace.com. And don't forget to subscribe, share, like, and send this out on your favorite social media accounts.